Um, for blessing of Allah, I start reciting a very short surah. The translation is there to save time. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Wal asri. Innal insana lafi khusr. Illa allazina amanu wa amilus salihati wa tawassaw bil haqqi wa tawassaw bis sabr. Next, please. Welcome all, and I request our Executive Director, Dr. Abid Kujum Sureri, for his welcome.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mahmood Khwaja. Good afternoon, good morning, good night, ladies and gentlemen, depending upon from wherever you are joining us. It's a matter of great pleasure and honor to be able to launch this publication, Poisons in Our Environment. I have a copy in my hand just to display it. And it's not that it's the launching of this publication. Today is very special, and the special is because today is the 28th anniversary of SDPI. So SDPI is 28 years old today, and to match with this occasion, what other gift could have been Dr. Khwaja. He came up with this publication that we are launching today. Now, when we talk of sustainable development, one of the things that define sustainable development is consistency of good practices. Sustainability, of course, is about consistency, and when it comes to consistency and persistence, it reminds me of Dr. Khwaja's efforts. So Dr. Khwaja, he has a habit that whatever topic he chooses to work upon, he tries to somehow transform his work into a piece of excellence. So whether it's on persistent organic pollutants, whether it's on mercury, whether it's on the tracing of poisons and their residues in environment. So he has been throughout his career, I have found him that he always remained very consistent, very persistent, and he tries to finish the assignment to the fullest satisfaction and to a perfection. And one of the reflection of the perfection today is the launching of his publication, Poisons in Our Environment. It encompasses the author's research of around last 2 decades. So during last 20 years, SDPI, the team SDPI, Dr. Mahmood Khwaja with his colleagues, Nazma Shaheen and Farzana Yasmin and a few others, they have been trying to trace the residue of hazardous waste material in air, in water, in soil, not only to trace it, but also came up with the methodologies on how to reclaim the environment from this poisonous stuff. He also highlighted in this book and through his, the case studies many of the general practices which are common, whereby the communities and people, public at large, they don't take these hazardous waste very serious. For example, one of the case studies that you will find in this book is about Nowshera, about an abandoned site of DDT factory. DDT, as you know, one of the toughest hydrochlorine chlorine pesticides. So there was an abandoned site where children used to play, where poultry and livestock they used to graze, and where there was a plan to convert it into some sort of housing complex, and it was due to the efforts of the team SDPI led by Dr. Khwaja that they not only identified the site and not only indicated the presence of huge DDT residues over there, but also they helped the local government to go in court and get a decree that that site would not be used for any commercial or residential purposes unless and until its soil is reclaimed and it was actually sealed. Similarly, he has indicated in Faisalabad, which is one of our industrial city, the presence of toxic matter in and which is actually let out as effluent, untreated effluent in the drains. So again, he showed that the quantity of effluent in industrial drains, it was much higher, and it was quite hazardous and risky for human health. So these are the sort of stories, evidence-based stories, and with primary data, with the review of literature, he has identified some of the sites. He has identified what needs to be done to reclaim those sites, and most importantly, he has tried to bridge the policy practice gap, asserting upon and recommending private sector to go for green and clean growth, adapt national environmental quality standards, and also on the local communities and the residents, that they should raise their voice when they find any of the violations of environmental protection standards. One of the recommendations that he has come up with, that we need to strengthen the regulatory bodies. So he has identified that in Pakistan there is no dearth of laws and regulators, but unfortunately those regulatory bodies, they are not empowered enough or not resourced enough to do their job proper. And if we really want our environments and our future generations, so with this recommendations, he has actually tried to give us not only identify the problem but also give solutions. So congratulations, Dr. Khwaja and team, and thank you very much for launching it on birthday of SDPI.
Thanks so much, Dr. Abid. I have to introduce the book, but I will be very brief in my presentation. Next slide, please. Because Dr. Abid has already kindly introduced the book, and also Professor Lu also, chapter by chapter, he had reviewed it. So I will be making my presentation very short. Actually, this study was a part of a global project which was started by, at that time, Blacksmith Institute. Now it's called Pure Earth. And Pakistan SDPI was a part of this study. And these were the main objectives of this global project, to identify and assess the contaminated sites, and also to enable national governments to prioritize mitigation, etc., and some other objectives also. Next one, please. This is very briefly how the map of the sites which were visited, almost 38 in 3 provinces. We couldn't go to Balochistan because the industrial base is very small there, and also there was a time constraints and the resources constraint. But we visited other 3 sites, other 3 provinces, and different cities, and in all we had 38 sites visited. Next one, please. These are some of the glimpses of the sites in KPK, the DDT factory, which Dr. Abid was mentioning. Next one. This was a dump site, but now I understand that this dump has been removed, which contained depleted pesticides. But I think the underground water and the surrounding soil and air is still to be monitored, because even last time when I visited, there was smell of these pesticides there. So air, water, and soil need to be investigated, even if these pesticides dumps have been removed from there. Next one. This is a site in Abbottabad, and you can see the burning smoke there, which is all time, and you can see the truckload of waste which is put up there to burn, and the children are playing there. One of our team member, Farzana, is taking the coordinates of this site. Next one. This is again another site near Peshawar University, and again when there is rain and monsoon, this it's overflowed, and it goes the wastewater goes everywhere, and the nearby the industrial state of Hayathabad, their waste and effluents also comes into this nala. Next one, please. This is again in Lahore, in Kasur area, where there are so many tanneries industry, and you can see all the contaminated waste all around. Next one. This is in Karachi, and this is the shipyard where the imported coal is dumped. And these are not mountains; these are heaps of coal which are there. And although they keep putting water on them to keep the particulate smoke particles less and less, but still, I mean, it's hard to breathe there. And there is a residential area close by. Next one. This is again in Karachi, in Hyderabad, and this site is contaminated in more than one way. Again, the industry is waste through this pipe. It is just openly thrown away, and you can see the almost a lake form there, where I'm taking some soil sample. Next one. This is again close to that site which I just showed you, and here these end-of-life batteries, they are dismantled and fabricated, and even children are working there, and it's done most unsound way of environmental sound way of this. And at one site there are more than 200-300 such spots which they call battery fabrication spots, and a stream just passes by, and the waste and the contamination most likely going there into that water which is being used for so many purposes. Next one. What was the point in writing in this book? Because I really have to wait, and we started work on it last January, and now we are in August, and every time I would give a target to myself, a date, but still I couldn't make it, subject to availability of time. There is no commercial interest at all. Basically, I mean, it is the hazardous sites and the exposure and the deteriorating environment and the public health which always compelled me and motivated me to make sure that I write this book and sensitize the national policymaker as well as the national and international donor to address rapidly, because this legacy toxic pollution is growing very fast, and it's most alarming. And also, I mean, another purpose was to have the enormous data. Because whenever we talk with our policymakers, they say, well, show us the indigenous data, show us local data. So, so we have indigenous local data, and also we collected last 30 years published work in Pakistan, which is put together in this book, and that could be a good reference for future work. Next, please. This is a brief format about this book. Chapter 1, mostly it defines the waste sites and contaminants, and then also the data which has been compiled, and every site. I mean, this is important to note that every site we have the information of that site, GPS coordinates, the site description of the pollution source, the concentration of the main pollutants, exposure pathway, population at risk, water and soil monitoring and analysis was carried out both in semi-solid and solid form. And most importantly, we met the stakeholders, the local residents, the local government people, the NGOs representative, industries representative. So at every site, we tried all these activities which are summarized below site data collected and compiled. Next one. Then the chapter 2 mostly describe every site, and I would not be talking much about it. Dr. Abid already have done it, and Professor Alu from Nigeria, he would be also talking about it because he reviewed the book chapter by chapter. So mostly, I mean, these were the cities which were visited and the sites which were visited. And the last chapter is way forward, and there are also over 100 references given with acronyms, and also there are 3 annexures. Next one, please. Mostly, I mean, way forward is about more than 4 or 5 pages, and I'm sure when the e-copy would be around, you would be reading it. And again, the reviewers has our distinguished panel of reviewer have very specifically discussed the way forward. So I would not be, I would be just moving over, but these were some of the recommendations which has been made. And it also include the health pollution fund, the need to create a health pollution fund for this site remediations. These recommendations came from Pure Earth, and we SDPI fully supported. Please. Now, out of 38 sites, these 10 sites we consider are the priority sites, and they are mostly in all the three provinces in KPK as well as Sindh, Punjab. But Punjab has need much more attention because there, to our assessment, there are about 4 sites there in 4 cities. So these the action need to be immediately taken on these, subject to, of course, resources and financial support. Next one. And again, I mean, site remediation, I mean, it's not a one stakeholder job. I mean, it's a multi-stakeholder jobs, and all need to be involved, and collaboration is most necessary. Next one. And why we are doing it? This is for our present generation of children and the future generation which is coming up, and they deserve these things. They deserve clean environment and other segments of environment. Next one. So this is where I finish my presentation. Thank you so much for your patient hearing, and I straight away go to our distinguished panel who are going to make comments as well as have reviewed this book. I thank them for their very hard work. Some of them have already sent me their written comments, and also we have one of our colleagues couldn't make it because of his commitment. So one of my teammates would be reading it, and there is also a video. I hope the video quality is good, both in sound and. So straight away, I go to the next one, please. I go to the distinguished panel. We have from host country Pakistan, Sayyid Abu Bakr Ahmed Akif, followed by Yahul, Ms. Lingling, Little Kora, Roland Weber, Professor Wajida Alu, Dr. Daryl Lusum. Again, Daryl has some commitment, and one of my colleagues will be reading his comments. And then also we have Jody Gandhi. He also has a commitment, but somehow he very kindly adjusted it, and he's going to present it himself. And we have then Dr. Chandra Petli. He also has an appointment with doctor. He's not feeling well, but he sent a video, and we hope that video quality is good and you all enjoy it. And then we also have our participant from Indonesia, Madam Yu Jun, but there was some sorrowful event, and I'm not too sure if she is with us or not. So I request Mr. Syed Abu Ahmed Akif, who is the presently Prime Minister Inspection Commission, and but he was our Federal Secretary of Environment and Climate Change, and he retired lately last year. So over to you, sir, Mr. Syed Abu Ahmed Akif.
Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Dr. Mahmood Khwaja, Mr. Dr. Abid Suleri, distinguished international scholars, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum, good evening or good morning, wherever you are. First of all, my warmest felicitation to Dr. Khwaja and SDPI for launching the book, Poisons in Our Environment. This book adds to the very limited repository of knowledge on environmental issues in Pakistan. Unfortunately, we have a dearth of serious workers and researchers on environmental issues. And most of the work finds its way to technical journals, and very little comes out the way of the general people, who remain as ill-informed as ever in spite of living in some of the most polluted environments in the world. In fact, before coming to talk today, I checked Google and entered books on environmental issues in Pakistan. And guess what? The first entry is from October 7, 2016, and it states that the book on environmental challenges of Pakistan has been launched. As I read further, I read the author of that book is also one Dr. Mahmood, whose book has come out from SDPI. And the person who spoke at that event was also yours very truly when I was Secretary of the Ministry of Climate Change. So not much has happened since Dr. Khwaja launched his book in 2016. So that shows the dearth of material on this field. Books have always played an important and crucial role in raising awareness amongst people. No environmentalist worth the name can forget the book The Silent Spring by Rachel Carson, which came out in the early 1960s. The book was the first significant contribution to raise awareness about pollution in the modern world. Indeed, it was a game changer. Rachel Carson informed us about the habit of pollution and the dangers to the life of people. A more recent book on climate change is actually entitled This Changes Everything by Naomi Klein. The issue of pollution since the times of Rachel Carson has come to become ingrained in the public consciousness and is now a significant factor in the political agenda of developing countries like Pakistan. Dr. Khwaja's book, Poisons in Our Environment, is a continuation of that effort at the national level. There is some serious work done by scientists on organic pollutants, but the work on pollution through heavy metals is very scarce. Dr. Khwaja has focused on both heavy metals and pollutants. The subject of pollution should be a priority for research and technological developments. While the book is primarily a technical volume, oriented more for the professional use by persons involved in research on pollutants and policymakers who are actively involved in mitigation and remediation, or those who are developing technologies, I would propose that a scaled down version for common readers should also be considered by SDPI. I'm sure, like last time when Dr. Khwaja also published his book in Urdu, a popular version will definitely play a greater part in raising awareness amongst the common citizens. The present book is loaded with actual data and figures on the levels of pollution found in major countries of Pakistan. Pollution not only brings on the burden of disease, but it also takes out lives. Unfortunately, makers and implementers of policy and laws are not great readers. When they start taking their jobs seriously, it will serve as an eye-opener for federal and provincial EPAs. And they would be able to use the data to grid up their responses. Books contribute a lot to scientific progress and actual data, and they are very difficult to write actually. Books like this, which have such a lot of data to sort of bring together, are very difficult. So I'm sure that Dr. Khwaja has spent a huge amount of physical effort and resources into writing this. And he deserves all our felicitation. I must also congratulate SDPI and its series of original research-based publications. However, just to curtail myself, lastly, I would like to make a suggestion. That is that we are in the age of the moving picture and social media. People generally read less and they see a lot more. So SDPI already has a production team, and I suggest that this book should be developed into a series of short 15-minute video presentations, which may be uploaded on YouTube so that people become more aware. Very few people will be actually reading the book, and more people can see this. And I'm sure those of us who watch Hollywood movies remember Erin Brockovich, in which Julia Roberts is a one-woman campaign against one of the biggest pollution scandals in the world. So I think there's a dire need to propagate messages about our environment, and so we should have more videos on the net. Finally, Dr. Khwaja and SDPI, Please keep up the good work. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks so much, sir. And I again apologize for the interruption. Next slide,
No problem.
please. My only comment is that Dr. Khwaja does not have huge resources, nor the SDPI has, but we certainly make our efforts to carry out big things with small means. And I hope SDPI and myself, we continue to carry big things with small means and small resources. Our next speaker is Ms. Yao Lingling from Beijing, China. Lingling, over to you. Please go ahead.
Good evening, good afternoon, everyone. Okay. First, I'd like to thank dear Mahmood and SDPI sharing with me and us, all of us, this wonderful book, because it has provided quite valuable info for us, especially for the environmental NGOs, understanding more about the situation in Pakistan. And the field survey to this 38 contaminated sites provided such valuable first-hand data. And I could even have look at the contamination map of these three main provinces. So this is quite precious for us outside Pakistan in China to get all this info, and we can even imagine how serious the health condition of the villagers or the local people is by living within or nearby this sites, or for the poor, even relying on the waste picking. This is quite shocked me a lot, and it's I believe that this info will help multi-stakeholders realize how urgent this should be changed for the public health, and even you have mentioned in the book for the economic growth in Pakistan. And for me, quite personally, it was most shocking to read that people even dismantle and then melt the batteries, the end-of-life batteries, to extract the reusable materials. So that's quite harmful to the people's health. So thanks the authors, thanks to DPI for sharing all these findings. I think that this will be quite important inputs for future solutions by multi-stakeholders. And this is an urgent call for more joint efforts at both domestic and global levels towards this waste management in Pakistan. And from the point of view of an environmental NGO, so I'm thinking of how civil societies could change the situation, especially working at a Chinese NGO. I'm thinking about how the China and Pakistan civil society could work together toward this. So based on those findings and results in the book, and I know that with the constraint of the resources, facilities, and expertise in Pakistan based on these actual situations, maybe the civil societies of Pakistan and China could be the important bridge between the countries by reaching multi-stakeholders to facilitate the, for example, the awareness raising, capacity building, experience sharing, even the technology transfer. So I'm thinking to put all this specifically, I propose or suggest that we may work towards or targeted at three main groups. The first one targeted at the EPAs. So we could bring together the EPA staff of the two countries, especially the local ones, and providing the capacity buildings on the environmental policy development and the implementation on EIA and waste management, hazardous sites management. So I think we could bring the bridge for the experience sharing between China and Pakistan, and we could also like to organize those experience sharing activities on the management of waste management. it's even including the imported waste from other countries, because I've noticed that Pakistan has imported those waste from other countries. This is also a important issue that we need to pay more attention to, and also under the COVID-19 currently, how we do the management of the increasing medical waste. So all of this we could think about. And the second one is target how we may target at the industries. Again, the awareness raising and the practice sharing between the China Pakistan industries and the waste management is fundamental and important. And also, we could do the industrial matchmaking for waste management between these two countries. This could include the facilities and equipment for waste treatment plants, especially wastewater treatment system, green technologies for unpolluted sites, remediation of the hazardous sites, and imported waste management. Also, the water dam and the contaminated soil removal. This kind of aspects. And the third target group, I think that is also essential and quite significant. That is about the local people. How could we help those local people? Again, awareness raising of those local people, the villagers, and the harm to the health from the hazardous exposure of the toxic waste, like waste picking, background melting, etc. We should do more about the awareness raising at the local level. And another aspect that I still want to mention or emphasize is that how should we think about helping the local people out of poverty? This is critical and fundamental. So as the CSO or NGO, we may mobilize the multi-stakeholders to promote the community development towards the poverty alleviation for those local rural poor people. So this is quite needed. So we may think about how to get more resources and fundings to provide them more living skills to help them out of the living conditions of relying on those traditional and even the harmful with the recycle living methods or living situations. So these above are my suggestions, and later I hope that this book will be spreaded wider and wider, and I in China would also like to share this book with more multi-stakeholders to think about how we can contribute more together.
Excuse me, 2 minutes more, please.
Okay, thank you. Actually, I have finished. Yeah. Okay. So thanks you again. Thank you. Thanks for SDPI sharing this book, and I will later think more about how to work together with you, with more NGOs or other Chinese governments or stakeholders to work toward this. Okay, thank you again. That's all.
Thanks so much. And let me inform the discussants and the participants that we have only published a few copies for this occasion. We have held back the publications because all the reviewer comments, they would go into the book. So please, even if you couldn't contribute all the comments, we have your written comments, and all the discussion comments, they will go into the book. Please, next one, please. Dr. Lilian Cora is from Argentina, is our next panelist. Lilian, are you around?
Yes, can you hear me?
very, very clearly. Very glad to hear you from Argentina. Please, over to you.
Well, thanks for inviting me. Really, we are very proud. You know, Dr. Mahmood Kohala is our past president of the International Society of Doctors for the Environment, and we recognize his valuable work and the both participation and on the chemical safety process at the international and the regional and national level, as I can see. He's a referent for his region and really is very valuable, his participation in all the chemical safety process. This publication is important as we really need more decision-making tools to move on actions at the community level and regionally to protect health and the environment. Each region is important, and we need more experts involved and scientific organizations associated with governments to move on and give visibility to the chemical agenda. The International Society of Doctors for the Environment really welcomes this publication and recognizes the importance effort done reflected on it. It is a good example that things can be done, and the chemical agenda had to be moved on. A lot of work is still to be done to protect health and effectively tackle the chemical safety problems. We recognize this the importance of this publication and really exceeds the frontiers of Pakistan. Thank you very much, Dr. Kohala, for inviting me, and congratulations.
Thanks so much, Lilian, and thanks also for saving some of time. And it's really a pleasure to hear you and talk to you. Now, moving on, our next one, please. Yeah, Dr. Ronald Weber is our next distinguished discussant from Germany. I had the pleasure of working with him in Pakistan when we were working on NIP. Dr. Roland, please, over to you.
Yes, good day to you all distinguished listeners. Thank you, Dr. Khwaja. Thank you, Mahmood, for invitation to give a comment on your very valuable book, Poisons in Our Environment. I think that your book complements, in my opinion, Pakistan's endeavor to protect human health and the environment from persistent pollutants. So while the national implementation plan of Pakistan, which we have developed over the last 4 years for the Stockholm Convention, is only addressing persistent organic pollutants, your book additionally investigates, describes and highlights the pollution by highly persistent inorganic major heavy metals, including arsenic, cadmium, chromium, lead, mercury, nickel, and so on, from industries and waste management and disposal. So these inorganic pollutants are perfectly persistent. This means that they are even more persistent than the POPs we are addressing, since they cannot degrade at all, and consequently the sites which are contaminated by these pollutants could stay polluted for centuries and even millennia in human timescales. So differently to POPs, these heavy metals are unfortunately not addressed by international conventions, because these pollutants do not travel across borders, except of mercury, which is also addressed by Minamata Convention. Instead, these pollutants largely stay at the sites where they are released and can contaminate the surrounding population by exposure from water, soils, and food production, also animals accumulating these pollutants. Since all the heavy metals addressed in these books are very toxic and are perfectly persistent, and due to their relative low migration, they continue to keep sites contaminated. There need to be a particular high interest of a country to control those pollutants for national security and safety, for current and in particular for future generation, contributing to sustainable development. The current book brings contaminated sites and their relevance for Pakistan and the affected population into the spotlight. Therefore, the book is a needed wake-up call to control this heavy metal pollution, in addition to pesticide pollution and other POPs contaminants. If Pakistan is not addressing the pollution from industrial activities and the mismanagement of waste, the country will step by step get further polluted, resulting in large health costs and eventually remediation costs. The book also highlights the risk of contamination of groundwater and the use of heavy metal contaminated irrigation water, resulting in contaminated food crops, documented also earlier. Climate change will result in more water shortage in Pakistan in future and consequently will increase the need of reusing water for irrigation with associated pollution risk. Only if heavy metals and other persistent water-soluble pollutants are controlled, the reuse of water can be sustainable. Otherwise, the reuse of water could result in heavy metal exposure of Pakistan's population at large. So the author of the book, Mohammed, together with colleagues, visited suspected contaminated sites in different provinces in Pakistan and did initial site assessment of the pollution and initial assessment of likely affected population. The results are alarming and require further detailed follow-up assessment at these sites and the stop of the exposure. Further, the study needs to be extended to other contaminated sites for the protection of affected population at large. I hope that the book will have a wider dissemination and that the government of Pakistan and the governments of the provinces will hear this wake-up call by you, Mahmood, for the sake of future generations of Pakistan. Then future generations would have a reason to praise the prudence, foresight and vision of the current generation for true sustainable development, which does not compromise the ability of future generations to meet their needs and to guarantee the basis to raise healthy children in a cleaner Pakistan. Thus, the control of heavy metals, POPs and other pollutants should become a part of Pakistan's Vision 2025 and the implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. To understand the material and substance flows of heavy metals and other persistent pollutants and to control and reduce these pollutants to minimize the exposure of current and future generation is urgently needed for a healthy and bright future of Pakistan's population. Thank you very much for that, Dr. Khwaja.
Thanks a lot, and thanks also for saving 2 minutes. Next slide, please. Next one, please. No, please keep it. Dr. Daryl, he couldn't make it because of his urgent travel. So my teammate, Tahira Shams, is going to read his comments. Tahira, over to you, please.
Thank you, sir. Salam, everyone. I'm going to read the Dr. Dolly remarks comment. The book Poison in Our Environment by Dr. Mahmood Khwaja, PhD for Sustainable Development Policy Institute, provides a valuable initial assessment of the 38 toxic sites throughout Pakistan and providing an assessment of the contaminated and hazardous waste site in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province and Islamabad, as well as the Punjab and Sindh provinces. This document presents the investigation of SDPI initial site assessment team, and Dr. Khwaja and his team provide detailed background information and laboratory testing results for the range of toxic heavy metal and pesticides in water and the soil sample collected from the site. SDPI also report on the sources of toxic wastes and the likely impact of the sites on local people, including children and the pregnant women, the most population to the threat imposed by these toxic chemicals. Dr. Khwaja provides a clear list of priorities for further work and urgent calls for the action for the site posing the most severe risks to human health and the environment. I would urge government authorities and industry to take heed of these findings and act to ensure the protection of the most valuable in society as a matter of urgency. Thank you, sir. Over to you, sir Khwaja.
Yeah, thanks so much, Tahira. We heard you very clearly. Next one, please. Prof. Alu, I had the pleasure of working with him We were together in the steering group of UN on chemical end products. I'm looking forward. My ears are eager to listen to you. Over to you, please. Ajida, are you hearing me? Okay, we can move on and we may come back. Maybe there could be some communication problem. We can come back. Next one, please. Again, welcome, Joe. It's a pleasure, and I had the pleasure of working with Joe on many occasions. We were together for many years. These days, he's in South Korea. Joe, over to you, please. Thank you so much for delaying your household commitment and joining us. I greatly appreciate that. Over to you. Over to you, Joe.
Thank you very much for your invitation, and congratulations to you and to your staff on the publication of this book and for the extensive work that it contains. This book provides a very comprehensive review of data on a large number of sites. And this is really a fundamental step towards protecting communities and the environment from the harmful effects of toxic metals and chemicals. It's also a key to sustainable development, and this kind of work can contribute to the fulfillment of several sustainable development goals. And these would include number 3, which deals with health, number 6, which deals with water and sanitation, 9, about sustainable industrialization, 11, sustainable cities, 12, sustainable consumption and production, and finally 15, which has a goal of reversing land degradation. There are quite a few things in the book that really stood out to me. One of them is that many of the sites are located close to residential areas. Some of them are used as playgrounds by children. And the contamination sources included textile factories, tanneries, paper mills, and other sources. It was also interesting that the owners of the tanning factories did not live in the community, but lived very comfortably far away in big cities and were seemingly unconcerned about the issues of their own facilities. The book and the testing involved soil and water and testing them for a variety of metals, but it's likely that there are many other substances present at these sites. I would guess chemicals used in dyes, in fat liquoring agents, pharmaceuticals, and other kinds of chemicals. Testing data is useful, but I found that the testimonies of nearby residents are equally useful and important because this can form a very important basis for assessing community health impacts. For example, at the Bangla Kamboyan site in the Kasar district, a health professional told the SDPI staff most of the females coming to the delivery home for treatment were anemic, suffer malnourishment with complaints of abdominal discomfort, hepatitis C, and abnormal births. So that should raise concern. In addition to the clear endangering of public health, I thought it was also interesting how some of the sites actually illustrate how one industry can harm another industry. For example, in the Chenab drain site in Punjab province, this site actually damaged the roads and the railway track. And at the Jarawanwala site, the area around that site could no longer be used for growing crops, so it impacted agriculture. One of the most sobering comments in the book, which happens quite often, is this one. It says, no efforts or initiatives seem to have been made by any relevant stakeholders with regard to environmentally safe management of the effluents or wastewater released from industrial units near the site area. Now, many people would understandably find this statement a bit depressing, and maybe they would find the book depressing, but really this statement and the book should be viewed as a call to action. Many of the Environment Agency and industry representatives quoted in the book point to the need for effluent treatment before discharge. That's a critical step before remediation because you want to turn off the flow of contaminants before you start cleaning it up. In fact, the ultimate goal for these industries should be zero discharge. The identification, management, and sustainable cleanup of contaminated sites is a key part of chemical safety. And as Dr. Khwaja mentioned, the ones that represent the greatest risk to human health and the environment should be prioritized for remediation. And a remediation plan should identify the stakeholders, develop cleanup criteria, determine how you are going to clean it up, the preferred options, documenting an environmental management plan, and finally, some sort of validation program that demonstrates that it actually is cleaned up. Addressing discharge and remediation are the first steps, but really the industry should not stop there. The industry should be working diligently to reduce and eliminate toxic substances in their manufacturing processes instead of generating a toxic mess that needs to be cleaned up later on. Many people find this topic to be overwhelming. However, identification and characterization of contaminated sites is a key step towards health and environmental protection. And that is why so many public interest NGOs around the world, including many in the IPEN network, work on this issue. Congratulations once again to Dr. Khwaja and SDPI. Best wishes in moving this topic and many other chemical safety issues forward. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Joe, again, and very especially that you relayed your personal commitment to join us. Thanks a lot. Before I call upon the next discussion, I wish to remind participants to please write your comments, your questions on the chat box. As Umer said earlier, we will be looking all of them and we will be responding to you. And please also write down your name and email for an electronic copy or a hard copy if you want. Thanks so much. Next one, please. Prof. Alu had very kindly given his comments to us, and I would be very briefly. Very briefly, I would be reading this. And as I said earlier, that all these comments, these would be included in the book. Professor Bijde Alu, he reviewed the book chapter by chapter, and almost we have 2.5 pages of comments. He started by saying that the book is decently written, 5-chapter books, and it's a compilation of studies and contributions of research in hazardous substances present in the environment in different parts of Pakistan. Coming from poor or absence of proper management, municipal and industrial waste. Then he talks about, in his concluding remark, he suggests that the book has eminently affirmed that waste management has been long an issue of critical concern for the health sector, Environment Protection Agency and civic authorities in the country. None of these bodies has the resources, the facilities or expertise to ensure environmental sound waste management. Legacy toxic pollution resulting from hazardous waste site is rapidly on the increase, damaging the environment, as well as threatening the public health, especially the health of the vulnerable population. The completed initial site assessment of 38 sites describe and discuss in this book have also indicated growing significant risk both to the environment and health of the people. And finally, he says that the author has therefore recommended some initial intervention as required and feasible for the site. And these include active site controls and treatment, clean to the environment, clean up, treatment plant installation, alternate water supply for drinking domestic needs of the local population, introduction and promotion of water treatment system, including household water treatment, waste dump and contaminated site removal, specific legislation for hazardous sites, and further research as may be required. So unfortunately, maybe due to communication problem, we could not get connections from Nigeria. But as this program is recorded, surely we would be sharing this with Professor Anu. Before I move on to the next presentation, which is by Dr. Jindrik, and which is video, because he has to go to doctor. He was not feeling well. But so before that, I invite our Joint Executive Director, I invite our Joint Executive Director, Dr. Waqar Ahmed, for his vote of thanks, and also for his comments on the viewers' comments, and whatever comments he may have on the book. Thank you so much, Dr. Waqar, for coming over. Over to you.
Dr. Waqar is not there. Actually, he is disconnected.
He's disconnected. Okay, so then please let's go to the video of Dr. Jindrik. Can you move on to? Can you show the next one, Dr. Jindrik, please? Yeah, and please start the video. We hope the quality of this video is good. Dr. Jindrik is not feeling well, so he sent us a video clip of 10 minutes. It's only 10 minutes. Please go ahead.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Indrik Petrlík, and I work with Arnika Association based in the Czech Republic, and I'm also co-chair of Dioxin PCBs and Waste Working Group of International Pollutants Elimination Network. I had the honor to cooperate with Sustainable Development Policy Institute and Mahmood A Khwaja in 2005 when we look at the levels of contamination by persistent organic pollutants in the surrounding of small medical waste incinerators, for example, in Peshawar. At the time, I had the opportunity also to visit Pakistan, and I very enjoyed cooperation with both SDPI and Mahmood in particular. Let me to say a few words on the occasion of launch of new book by the team led by Mahmood A Khwaja, which is called Poisons in Our Environment. This book focuses on toxic contamination of the environment at certain sites in Pakistan. This book is a very new one and very interesting because it gathers data about pollution, or especially pollution by heavy metals in certain areas in Pakistan. It focuses also on mapping and gathering new data about 38 contaminated sites in different parts of Pakistan. And I must say that these are very original and new data which contributes to the knowledge about the level of contamination of the environment in Pakistan quite substantially. Research team of SDPI visited these sites and collected also the knowledge of local stakeholders, which is always very important experience shared with audience who reads the book, and I believe that the book will be a very useful source of information about contaminated sites in Pakistan. Mostly it is the water, what is contaminated at the mapped sites. And I must say that water is very important in daily lives of population everywhere in the world. And if you look at the level of contamination of water sources at certain sites by heavy metals, which can cause serious health effects, serious illnesses, or even long-term damage of the health of local inhabitants. It demonstrates the fact that the costs incurred by the sickness or health effects of contamination by heavy metals is very significant. And we must take it into account if we think about necessity to clean up such contaminated sites, which is mostly up to decision makers to decide whether to go for remediation of contaminated sites or not. And this is another very important part of the book because it also informs readers about the effects of contaminants found at the contaminated sites. And this is very crucial to understand the effects of the pollutants as such. We can find also suggestions how to solve the situation in chapter 5 of the book, which is called Way Forward. And there are very specific suggestions, which is good. It, for example, suggests that preferably effluent treatment may be carried out at point source within the industrial unit, or several sources might come together and to have a joint effluent treatment plant as a feasible option. I found these suggestions and these measures as very useful one, and I can only agree with those suggestions. What is very important that the author also suggests some prioritization of contaminated sites for remediation, because it is clear that some sites are more seriously contaminated or are very close to inhabited areas. So it is important to clean up them preferably or first. And it is important to give such a guidance to decision makers. So in general, I found this book as very original approach to mapping of contaminated sites, which is very difficult. And at the same time, it is, I believe, the first kind of inventory of contaminated sites in Pakistan, and it can also serve as a pilot project for other developing countries, not only in Asia. Several suggested actions in the book are focused on prevention of further contamination of land and water. And it is important part because the prevention of creation of new contaminated sites is very crucial because it prevents other costs for remediation of another contaminated sites. So the book in that way addresses very important approach to pollution, which is precautionary principle. The book also states that during discussion of the research team, several stakeholders expressed the view that the major barrier in combating the industrial pollution problem in the country was a lack of political will and low priority to the issue by the government. I must say that it is unfortunately a very common common approach which we see in different countries. But this kind of approach is not sustainable because the costs incurred by health damage caused by contaminated sites will grow throughout the time. So I would suggest to take actions on contaminated sites as soon as possible, at least to prevent contamination of the food chain and the water sources for local inhabitants as such. The book also shows how civil society can address such an important topic like contaminated sites. And the book also say that civil society can play a vital role towards industrial pollution control, and it's true everywhere in the world as well as in Pakistan. I could only add two more potential measures which might be taken into account, and it is introduction of pollutant release and transfer register in Pakistan, which might help to map an important sources of pollution, and also another approach might be to suggest that facilities can use the water taken down their discharge of wastewater treatment. So I wish all the best to the book and the team, and I wish you also a very nice rest of the day to Pakistan. And I'm sorry I couldn't attend personally this time. Have a nice day.
Since Jindri would be listening to the recording of this video, so I wish to thank him very much that despite not feeling well, he made it a point to send us this this video clip, which we heard very clearly, and also we saw it very clearly. Before I move on to Dr. Waqar, Adnan, is Dr. Waqar connected?
Yes, sir, he is there.
Dr. Waqar is our, please show the slide. Please.
Thank you, Dr. Khwaja.
Yeah, Dr. Waqar is our Joint Executive Director. Dr. Saab, over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Khwaja, and of course, I'll be very brief. Let me start by congratulating you, your team who has participated with you, and of course, on behalf of SDPI, I must thank all the reviewers of this book, very timely book. I think the reviewers have done great justice with their work by contributing not just their knowledge, but also ways through which this book can be utilized. I think I will only stick to two points, and I take lead from what former Federal Secretary Climate Change said, that the book sort of, in terms of this creating an impact on policy, on practice, I think there are two main things which are necessary. First is, of course, that the policy process should respond to the very timely recommendations which have been provided in this book. And if there are difficulties or capacity gaps that prevent an understanding of policymakers to understand these recommendations, I think Dr. Khwaja's team, led by Dr. Khwaja himself and SDPI, should stand ready to help in capacity building terms and orientation terms to increase their awareness. Now, a point related to this is, of course, that many of the people who wish to do a lot of what has been suggested in the book in the social accountability space need to be capacitated as well. So many of the civil society organizations who are willing to be partners in these areas where research by Dr. Khwaja has been conducted, I think this book gives greater strength to those NGOs, those civil society organizations at the local level, so that they can use it to strengthen their social accountability tools and to hold the relevant policy institutions, practice institutions accountable for implementing the necessary protocols, the necessary remedial measures in order to prevent the spread of negative externalities which have been highlighted in the book. I once again congratulate Dr. Khwaja on this very wonderful effort. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Dr. Waqar, for your comments and for going through the book, although you received the book very, very late. I think now we open the floor and ask for comments and suggestions, but let me repeat again that because of so many participants around, all comments cannot be taken on the line. So please do write your questions, your comments, your suggestions on the chat box, and I assure you that all of these would be carefully read and responded on the email. I think in all fairness, I should ask my team member if any one of them is around, Nazma Shaheen or Farzana Yasmin, to say hello and a few words. Over to you, Nazma Shaheen or Farzana Yasmin. Any one of you, if you are there, because Farzana is in Belgium, and I am not sure whether Nazma Shaheen is in Pakistan. All right, the floor is open. Please put on your mic to speak one by one. Any comment, any suggestions, any feedback? Please open your mic to so that you can be given access. Well, I think we have almost concluded. We are over time because it was scheduled till 5 o'clock, and now it's 15 past 5, and the Asar Azan call for the prayer is also have just started. So once again, I thank you very much, all of you, for sparing time and joining us from different parts of the world. And thank you so much again. And inshallah, we would be in touch. And please do send your comments on email. We would be very much taking care of that. And very soon, the electronic copy would be shared with all the participants. Bye bye. Khuda Hafiz. Good night. Whatever is the time.